There's no way that you could watch Michael Jordan and LeBron James and think that Michael Jordan is not the GOAT.
LeBron James has spent so many years as a face of the NBA that hearing the conversation turn against him almost feels unfamiliar. For the longest time, whenever LeBron had an off night, the spotlight rarely stayed on him. The blame usually shifted somewhere else. It was the coach, the roster, the front office, the schedule, the matchup, or the idea that he simply needed more help. To be fair, there were plenty of situations where those arguments were completely reasonable. But now the tone is changing. The excuses are becoming less convincing. Patience is wearing thin. And even members of the media who once defended him at every turn are beginning to ask tougher questions. That is what makes this moment so fascinating. The latest criticism is not centered on a missed shot or a poor scoring performance. It goes much deep in the box score. The focus is on defense. It is about effort. It is about whether a 41-year-old LeBron James, who is still celebrated for every spectacular highlight, should also be held accountable when his intensity fades on the defensive end. And according to the source, that is exactly the conversation that is now growing louder than ever.
Your best interest to play all 82. Is that something you thought about at all since you made the goal?
I mean, that's a goal, but we'll see. But it's something I ain't discussing right now.
Reports suggest the Lakers recently held a meeting involving J.J. Redick, LeBron James, and Luka Doncic after a stretch of disappointing defensive performances. Redick, who has already built a reputation for demanding accountability, reportedly challenged his two biggest stars to bring more energy and commitment on the defensive end. That alone says a lot about where the team's focus is right now. This is not a debate about whether LeBron can still put points on the board. It is not about whether he can still throw down a powerful dunk or come up with a spectacular chase-down block from time to time. Everyone knows those moments are still part of his game. The real question is whether he is consistently giving the Lakers the defensive effort they need every single night. That is where the criticism becomes much sharper. According to the source, the biggest explanation people now lean on is LeBron's age. He is 41. So what more can anyone realistically expect? That has become the go-to response whenever his defensive intensity is questioned. The argument is that he is no longer the same athlete and cannot be expected to chase every possession the way he did in his late 20s. On the surface, that sounds completely reasonable. But the source points out an interesting contradiction. Whenever LeBron explodes for a dunk, races down the floor in transition, makes a highlight chase-down block, or flashes the athleticism that defined his prime, the conversation instantly shifts. People celebrate him as an athletic marvel, call him the greatest 40-plus player the game has ever seen, and praise his incredible longevity as further proof of his place in the GOAT debate. That naturally raises an important question. If he is still exceptional enough to receive endless praise for those athletic highlights, why should it suddenly be off limits to criticize the possessions where his defensive effort falls short? That is the heart of the argument, and it highlights what many see as a long-standing double standard surrounding LeBron. When he delivers unforgettable plays, the recognition comes immediately. Every milestone adds to his legacy, and every remarkable moment earns another wave of admiration. But as soon as the discussion shifts toward consistent effort, especially on the defensive end, the tone changes. Age becomes the explanation. Fatigue becomes the justification. Suddenly, expectations are lowered, and defensive lapses are treated as something that should simply be accepted because of the miles on his career.
I mean, listen, we came that far, so, trying to see if I can make plays. Obviously my presence on the floor, is key for our ball club, but, I thought the guys did a great job, especially in overtime. I thought Marcus was great in overtime, hit the three, and away from their bench. I think Rui threw it over the top. He hit the three, got to the free throw line, made free.
That is exactly the point the source is pushing back against, and it is difficult to ignore the argument being made. Nobody is asking LeBron to become Gary Payton or spend 40 minutes locking down the opposing team's best scorer. No one expects him to cover every inch of the floor or defend with the non-stop intensity of a player in his athletic prime. But there's a clear difference between having physical limitations and appearing mentally disengaged. There is a difference between conserving energy and looking like you've already given up on the possession. And there is a difference between getting older and simply choosing not to compete. That distinction is at the center of this debate. The source repeatedly emphasizes that LeBron's defensive struggles are not viewed as purely physical. If they were, the conversation would be very different. People would focus on the natural effects of aging, reduced minutes, changing roles, and the reality that every player eventually slows down. Instead, the argument is that LeBron still shows flashes proving he is capable of making elite plays when he decides to. He can still sprint back for a game-changing defensive stop. He can still rise above the rim for explosive dunks. He can still display the speed and burst that leave fans wondering how someone his age can move that way. Those moments suggest that the issue is not simply a body that can no longer keep up. According to the source, the bigger question is how and when that energy is being used. That is why the criticism has become so direct. The claim is that LeBron is choosing when to give maximum effort and when to conserve it, choosing when to sprint back, when to coast through a possession, when to contest a play, and when to remain focused on the officials after a turnover while the Lakers are forced to defend with essentially 4 players. Those are the habits that fans notice, and once they become impossible to ignore, defending them becomes much more difficult. The reported meeting with J.J. Redick only adds to that narrative. If the head coach felt the need to bring LeBron and Luka Doncic together for a conversation about defensive accountability, it suggests this is no longer just media speculation. It becomes an issue the coaching staff believes must be addressed internally. And the fact that Redick reportedly challenged a 41-year-old superstar with one of the greatest careers in NBA history to raise his defensive intensity speaks volumes about how concerned the team has become. That is where the discussion shifts from admiration to frustration. And according to the source, the story did not end after that meeting. The Lakers managed to get past the Kings, but then struggled again against the Pistons. The defensive problems remained. The effort was still being questioned. The overall performance continued to look inconsistent. The argument even goes as far as claiming that LeBron remained the team's weakest defender during that stretch. It also points to his ranking near the bottom of the league in individual defensive win shares, a statistic that many people once avoided mentioning when discussing a player of his stature. Now, however, it has become part of the conversation.
Michael Jordan has 10 scoring titles. Michael Jordan was a 9-time All-NBA defensive team member. Michael Jordan won 6 titles, 6 NBA Finals MVPs, never once allowed a game to get to a championship series to get to a Game 7. Never once. That was in his 13 years in Chicago. We ain't counting the 2 years with the Wizards. He was trying to become an owner, and they needed him to come out of retirement to have an ownership stake. That's what they needed.
If you're a Lakers fan, that reality has to be frustrating because this team already has enough challenges to overcome. They are not built like a flawless championship contender. They do not have the kind of roster that can erase defensive mistakes with elite offense every single night. They need their best players to establish the standard. They need their stars to fully buy in. Most importantly, they need LeBron James and Luka Doncic to lead with consistent effort on both ends of floor, so the rest of the team can follow their example. When that doesn't happen, the Lakers become vulnerable to exactly the type of performances the source describes. They get outplayed, suffer lopsided losses, and struggle against teams they should be beating much more comfortably. That is where the familiar roster argument always returns. Supporters of LeBron often point to the same explanations. The roster is not talented enough. There is not enough help around him. The team lacks reliable defenders. The supporting cast has too many weaknesses. And to be fair, there is truth to some of those criticisms. The Lakers are far from a perfect team, and the roster certainly has flaws. But according to the source, that is not the real issue. The bigger question is whether those roster problems excuse a lack of effort. The answer, according to the argument being made, is no. That is where the narrative starts to fall apart. A limited roster might explain why the Lakers are not viewed as title favorites. It might explain why they lack depth or why their defense has struggled throughout the season. But it does not explain moments where LeBron appears disengaged. It does not explain staying behind to argue after a turnover instead of sprinting back on defense. It does not explain allowing second-chance opportunities by failing to fight for defensive rebounds. And it does not explain why a player with his basketball, IQ, and physical ability can sometimes appear passive when the team needs maximum effort. That is why, according to the source, the defense of his play is becoming harder for many people to accept. The source also raises another important point. If LeBron truly can no longer handle the defensive demands of a major role, then the logical solution would be to adjust his workload. That could mean reducing his minutes, accepting a smaller role, or managing his playing time more carefully like most players in their 40s. On paper, that is a perfectly reasonable approach. The source says LeBron reportedly rejected minute restrictions, insisting he could still handle a superstar role. If that is the case, then he also has to accept the criticism that comes with it. You cannot claim you're still at that level when praised, then use age as an excuse when criticized. The source also argues the Lakers are now Luka Doncic's team. LeBron is still a great player, but he is no longer the franchise's centerpiece.
Every person in the bubble is under a unique circumstance. Everybody that's in the bubble is not accustomed in a professional career of playing without fans. So, Skip, no one wants to hear why you guys haven't played well, why you haven't shot the ball well, why you haven't looked like the Lakers that gained the #1 seed in the West. All they want to hear is what are you going to do to fix the problem?
The Lakers no longer need LeBron to dominate every possession. They need him to do whatever helps the team win, even if that means sacrificing touches or accepting a smaller role. According to the source, if he cannot consistently handle those responsibilities anymore, then the conversation shifts to reducing his role or eventually retiring. Every great player reaches that point. What do you think? Is the criticism of LeBron's defense fair, or are expectations simply too high? Let us know in the comments and subscribe for more NBA coverage.